Hi class, so in this video I'm going to break down how I want you to chunk. And as I wrote in the assignment itself, I'm going to say it again. I think this combined with the talking to the text activity, probably the most effective ways to get the most out of your reading, to comprehend it more effectively, especially when you're faced with the daunting task of reading a rather large book, right? And in this case, we're reading a chapter of a book, so it's still pretty long. So, as it said in the assignment, chunking is basically just like it sounds. You're going to break the text up into chunks. And when you do that, when you pause, stop, and you're going to do something that we call a monitor and correct and kind of sum up what you've read to that point, and you are going to write a 1 to 2 sentence summary of each chunk, and then you move on. How do you know when to chunk? Well, that kind of depends on you, and I will explain how I chunked this assignment as we go through it. But if the reading is particularly difficult, you might have to chunk each paragraph. Right? Sometimes you could go pages and pages. But the more you do this, the more you are going to recognize some of the author's moves as they transition from one point to the next. All right, so I'm just going to take you through my talking to the text. All right. So again, this is the student fear factor. You guys already read this. And you are going to be chunking the masculinities piece. Okay, so right off the bat here, I thought this was a main idea statement, and I think I clicked. Yeah, so I put over here main idea, right? All students, even the seemingly prepared, because that's what the author kind of let us know here, right? Feel some semblance of anxiety. What happened to it? I guess I cut it off, right? As they walk onto the college campus. So, I don't know what happened to my other piece there. But, oh, there it is. As they make their way onto the college campuses. This is according to Cox, right? Okay, so I thought, that would definitely be a golden line for me. Okay, so let's get out of that. Oops, okay. All right. Okay, so that's my first golden line. Then down here, I stopped a couple of things. I noticed this header here, but I kind of commented on that, right? So I wrote, the author uses Eva as a hook to introduce her main point, right? That's the anxiety faces every kind of community college student. It does not discriminate, although I think there's a pattern that I will talk about a little bit later, okay? And then I noticed that the article was broken up into these nice little headings, so I made an annotation there. But this is one way that an author can help the reader decide when to chunk. Headings can represent chunks of text because the heading will introduce the next topic that the writer will discuss. So on that note, we have one chunk here, right? So what you're going to do is, this was my main idea, right? And there's really not a lot going on. And we'll talk more about this. The first thing you're going to see in a paper is the introductory paragraph, right? A hook. So you may or may not find a thesis statement, but you're probably going to get some sort of a story, right, to grab your interest. So there's our first chunk. So I copy and paste that, and you guys are going to fill this out. I don't care how you do it. I explain it. Let's see. So there you go, pages 20 to 22, the main point. There's not a lot going on. It doesn't mean it wasn't important, because I thought it was a good hook. The author uses Eva as a hook to introduce her main point, right? Anxiety faces every kind of community college student. Okay, let's continue. All right. So I highlighted this. Oh, we already talked about that. This one. Question, right? What does that say? Enrolling in college courses proved to be an immensely stressful transition, right? So I was wondering, okay, why? Why is, just the simple act of just registering for a school like Delta, why is that stressful? Okay, that's a question. Again, right, I am having this conversation with the author. Okay? And my next annotation, transition into college represented a crucial threshold to adulthood. And I put, yeah, this makes sense. In my own experience, it seems that today's 17, 8-year-olds, right, are more like the 15 and 16-year-olds of yesteryear. Not in a bad way, right? I didn't mean that as a negative, but it does seem like the kids these days are starting to mature later than they used to. I remember, I was making a personal connection. I got my first job when I was 15 and a half. I was making $4.25 an hour. I thought I was rich. But a lot of students are staying home. Right? They're not, which is fine. Okay? All right. So my next chunk, I just point this out that this is kind of like a block quote, right? This is basically to let us know that we are hearing things from Melanie's point of view there. Okay? And whoops, there's Melanie. What are I doing? Okay, I guess my chunks didn't say, I guess they didn't save here. I don't know what happened. I had a few. Oh well, that's okay. So we'll just skip on to the next page. All right. And I chunked this part here. It says, because in high school you have 2 weeks to learn one section, and here it's like one day you learn a section, the next day you learn, right? So that's her way of kind of comparing the pace of the high school curriculum to the college, and that kind of prompted a question for me, right? Which style is best? Here, young adults such as Melanie were not the only ones to view the first semester of college as scary, unfamiliar, or life-changing. Individuals well outside the traditional college age range as well, and I had a note on that. And I put, the author seems to be transitioning away from Melanie, right? So this is important, right? So we can see that the author just talked about Melanie, but she's transitioning, and I put, this would be a logical place to maybe stop and chunk, right? But I am going to use Cox's headings as my barriers, right? As chunking markers, unless the reading starts to get pretty dense, then I may stop. Then I got, because nearly every student viewed a college degree as essential to her future, they were all embarking on high-stakes adventure. All right? And I made a prediction. I predict that this is the cause of some of the anxiety. And remember, if we roll back up here, students, right? That was our key term. So we know that this section is going to have something to do with students, the student anxiety. Again, I don't know what happened to my chunks there, but that's okay. Okay, and my next annotation, right? This answers my question earlier about where the anxiety comes from. These students seem to be laying it all on the line, right, for a chance to to break through, to ascend, right? To ascend maybe from low class to low middle, or to low middle to middle, right? They're trying to basically improve themselves, right? So the question about the high stakes, right? Why is this, I'm sorry, that was my other question from back here. Why the anxiety, right? Why? So the question was, why would just the simple act of signing up at a college like Delta, why would that cause so much fear? Well, I got the answer, right? So I hope you can see the value of this. A question that I posed 3 or 4 pages ago, right? I wrote it down, so it's going to stick in your brain. I found the answer to that. Okay, and then up here, let's see. For some students, this fear, a natural part of any transition, was heightened by their past experiences with failure. Okay, so a high stakes decision as well as a lack of self-confidence. So now we're starting to see what causes that student, the anxiety, right, that she talks about. That they are really throwing themselves out there, right? They're saying, I'm going for it. But at the same time, they have this in the back of their mind. They're worried, right? Because they've had some bad experiences, okay? Keep keep going. In addition, many students had fallen down on one or more of the entry-level assessments, whether in reading, writing, or math. And then I thought, aha, that's no longer the case, right? Most of you are listening to this right now, probably 5 years ago, would have been placed into an English 79 class, or maybe even an English 78 class. But that's no longer the case. Everybody gets to go in 1A, and I think that's the best way. All right, so I'm making a connection to the curriculum that we used to have at Delta. Continuing on. Looks like, for many, their presence at a community college, the least selective and lowest tier of colleges, oh, that's not a real college, right? Offered proof of their minimal academic competence. So in other words, the fact that they are going to Delta, the fact that they're going to CRC, proves that they are not college material. All right, but look at what I have to say about this. When I was in high school, if you went to Delta, you got made fun of too, right? In fact, there was a name for it. They used to call it UBT, the University Behind Target. However, as I tell my students, and I'm telling you now, I am a Delta graduate, and there are several other faculty members who teach at Delta who went to school here too. And on another note, I have talked to some of my former students who went to Berkeley, who went to Brown. They always come back and talk about how their experience here at Delta was actually better. Because when you guys transfer, you may wind up in a huge form class with 400 students. Okay? All right, so we reached the next heading. So I put end of another section, a better chunk. So what does this talk about, this section, the anxiety? Well, I think Cox talks about how this anxiety stems from, what I write? Cox, she illustrates one component of the student fear factor, anxiety, right? The anxiety stems from a high stakes decision that, you know what, I know I need to get a college degree. I'm going to go for it. But they have that self-confidence from their past experiences, right? So that's the main idea. So we copy and paste that. Go back to our chunk, pages 22 through 25, and there it is. All right, I thought we would do the next one together. And then you guys will be on your way. Okay, let's go back here. All right, fear factor. Okay, so we know Cox is probably going to be talking about fear. Let's take a look here. Many students who seriously doubted their ability to succeed, however, were anxiously waiting for their shortcomings to be exposed, at which point they would be stopped from pursuing their goals. And this reminded me of something. Maybe you guys can help me out here. Some of you have a strong psychology background. Well, this term I heard of, right, is that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The idea that we can wish or believe bad things, right? That if we keep thinking them, that we might actually wish them into existence. So that's kind of what that reminded me of there. Okay, let's see. Next section would be over here. The same feelings of dread and the apprehension that success in college would prove to be an unrealizable dream. There we go, right? There's that self-confidence. Seems like they don't think that they belong. What about here? Essentially, students were afraid that their professor would irrevocably confirm their academic inadequacy. So in other words, they were just waiting for that one moment in class, right? When the professor calls on them and he or she says something stupid, just to prove the fact that, yep, I don't belong here. So they have that going on in their head, and it kind of reminds me of a term, and I spelt it wrong, the imposter syndrome, right? So the idea that, you know, you may have a job, you may be part of a group or something, but you feel like you're not good enough to be in there, right? And you're just waiting. Somebody is going to out you. You don't belong here. So that's what these students are feeling. All right, so let's see. Here, what did I put here? Okay, so they talk about this, the high and mighty professors. There's some examples here. And I thought this was kind of cool. She's speaking to him like he's there, but he isn't. So basically, they're talking about this major disconnect between a much different demographic, right, that kind of makes up the college students and the professors that are teaching them. But that changes when we get over here, right? They noted that the community college professors did not fall into that category, and I happen to agree with that. Yes, there seems to be a change happening right here at Delta, and you may have noticed it. There are a lot more younger faculty, more hip. I mean, I was told many years ago when I said, yeah, I would like to teach at Delta one day. Ha! You better get a PhD. I totally disagree with that. I think, you know, we should have a diverse, community college faculty, and one of the ways that they could be diverse is, you know, that maybe, you know, they don't all have to go to Harvard or Yale and have a PhD, right? Maybe they were first generation college students like myself, right? Maybe they had to put their way through school. So I think there's a change, but this is important though, because as we go here, their interactions with these professors still reflected an intimidation. So even though all the talk here about the high and mighty, you know, the pompous ass, a professor, and over here they realized that at the community college that wasn't the case. It didn't matter, right? These students were still feeling that intimidation. And again, that reiterates back to that self-confidence that I was talking about. And there's the support for the previous highlight there. Again, so since like we're moving from like Serena and Ryan, and it looks like the author could be making a transition here. And if she hadn't provided those headings, I might have chunked, but I didn't. All right. Here, that Colleen would resort to hiding from her philosophy teacher. Again, so I think this kind of relates back, way back here, right, to the first paragraph. When Cox kind of provides this hook of this seemingly well-prepared student, yet what happened? So she's kind of circling back to her here with Colleen. Why is that? Well, Colleen, she was volunteering in the writing center. She was helping out her peers. She was almost taking on like a motherly role, yet she succumbed to the fear, right, and the anxiety. Again, here they talk about the classes that students are afraid of the most, math and composition. I have seen this, so this is my personal connection. Lots of students have anxiety about turning in their writing. And let's see. Over here, not by coincidence, among the community college offerings, this high-stakes course. Okay, so this is going back to the remediation. Students score lower on a placement test that you guys no longer have to take. They get put in this class, and now there's more pressure. It's like you have to pass English 79 to get to that 1A. And let's see. I bet some of her past experiences gave her this anxiety. So they're talking about Linda, right? Some of her past experience. And again, I was just thinking this, but look at right after. Boom. Right? This just reaffirmed my claim. I love it when this happened, right? So I made a prediction only to have it confirmed in the very next paragraph. Okay? Again, the author's circling back to Eva. Now we're talking about male students. And, you know, this is what we're going to be reading about, I think, in that masculinity piece. And then finally, because of the fear and because I didn't know exactly what the teacher wanted. This is a good point, especially, so this might have something to do with the writing, right? All writing teachers have their pet peeves, and it places a burden on the student to learn them. This is probably one of the reasons why students are afraid to turn in their writing and they don't know what the professor wants, right? Okay, and then basically we reached the end. Taking courses had to convince Neridia, for example, that she wasn't really college material. Again, this is that kind of the idea of the community college is, you know, is not the same as going to a university. And again, this kind of reiterates back to the common theme that I've noticed in this section, the lack of confidence and that disconnect between teacher and student. And here, So he's talking about the four-year school. There is some truth to this. Lots of students aren't ready for college. It might have something to do with that maturity level. Again, I'm making my own connections to some of my annotations. And that's pretty much it. We get to fear management. Okay, so let's go through this. What do we got? Lacking self-confidence. There seems to be a theme there. The disconnect between the professor and student. See, so that's Colleen again, talking, right, the lack of self-confidence. So I think that's my common theme here. Lack of self-confidence and the inability to relate to the professor. Right? So we would go back to our chunking sheets, and where were we at here? We're all the way to 31. See, we're way ahead now. 31. So what, like 25 to 31. And, you know, basically we'll talk about the fear that students feel from attending college can be broken down into two main components. I don't know. Lack of self-confidence and a disconnect with the faculty, which is important, right? If you don't feel like you have a connection with the teacher, that's going to make it worse. Okay, so look what we've got. 11 pages. Out of 11 pages, look how much we've already shrunk it. So hopefully you can see the value of this. Okay? So, I'll come back when this is all done and we'll talk about how to write a summary.